Welcome everybody to our New Tracks meetup this evening. I appreciate so much you coming. I hope you really enjoy this. It's going to be fascinating, I believe. And I hope you come back often and I hope you tell your friends about us. First, I want to talk a little bit about the train show that's coming up. Our second one is November the 21st at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We have twice as many vendors for this one as we had on the first one. And I think it's really going to be something to see. So if you can put it on your calendar, I hope you'll come. The one after that, our third one, is scheduled for January the 16th. And the one after that is March the 20th, 2021. And then we're planning to have them every 2 months after that, but we don't have dates yet. So that's what I wanted to comment. And then I want to introduce Jack Gistel.
Shottle.
Dylan, you ought to do this for me. Of Ipswich Hobbies. And Jack, I apologize. I promise you, Jack, I'm still trying. But Jack would like to talk about his company a little bit. Jack was one of the first people that signed up for our first show. And the minute he heard about it, he said, yeah, I want to do that, and signed up for it. So Jack, thank you so much for doing it, because you really helped kickstart the whole effort for our train shows. So Jack, if you take it over for a little bit, I appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jim. And gentlemen, my name is Jack Jottle with Ipswich Hobbies. I grew up in Massachusetts. I live in Sanford, North Carolina now. And you can see on the first of my slides.
Let me actually get those up real quick, Jack.
Dylan can bring it up.
All right, there we go.
Very good. And you see my phone number, my web address right there, and the name of the company, Ipswich Hobbies. Next, Dylan. We manufacture craftsman kits, all basswood laser cut. My first kit is based upon the prototype in Rockport, Massachusetts. We affectionately call it Rockport Freight House. This is available in HO as well as N. Next, Jim. Next, Dylan. Now, my second production was the Union Freight House. And coincidentally, Jim Kello hosted the folks from the Union Freight House Model Railroad Club just a few sessions ago. That building in the top right is the prototype, and the HO scale version is top left, and scale is in the bottom photograph. The dock, as you can tell from the top right photograph, it no longer exists, but otherwise it's still on the main line in its original position. Next, Dylan. My third production was, or is the REA baggage shed that was along the Eastern Railroad, now B&M or now MBTA line that runs through Ipswich, Massachusetts. The left side shows you the HO scale model. The top right photo is the vintage rendering. And the bottom right photo shows you what it looks like in its present state as a storage shed behind a private house. Next. Dylan, next up. There you go. This is the crossing shanty. I stumbled across this in Rowley, Massachusetts, but it was originally in Ipswich, Massachusetts, and presently is back in Ipswich. This is the HO version on the left side. The brand new O scale is in the center photograph, and the prototype in its restored state is on the right-hand side. That nice detail is the B&M smoke jack, which I had 3D printed by Rusty Stumps. Okay, next one. This is the section house. HO scale version is on the left, N scale top right. The O scale production test kit is in the middle. And the prototype I was able to capture before it totally collapsed, fell down, and was removed. But the point that I'm making here is that each of my line side kits are based on actual structures that I've researched, photographed, and in most cases, if they're still around, I've measured them. Dylan, next, please. This is my first North Carolina based kit. This is the Goldston Depot, which is a combination depot. It's been modified, extended, and shortened over the years. It is presently at the New Hope Valley Railroad Museum in New Hope, North Carolina, conveniently just about 10 miles from me. Originally a Cape Fear and Yadkin Valley depot. And what is key here is this has a beautifully detailed interior. And I show you a couple of charts on the right side of what the interior looks like. So there are some very large windows that you can sort of see in the bottom left photograph. So this building begs to be lit up. This is an HO scale. It's also available in N. And the bottom center shows the truck side version of the actual building being restored currently. Next, Dylan. This is the Goldston tool shed. The center photograph is what it looks like today behind a private home in Goldston, North Carolina. And the top left is the HO version, top right is the N scale version. I'll probably come out with an O scale version later next year. And next, thank you, Dylan. Coming in 2021, I'm working presently on these two. The top left is the commissary, which no longer exists. So this is a bit of a challenge for me. I only have two photographs, both from the same angle. And it was probably demolished in the late 1950s. But it's where North Station is, called the BET, or Boston Engine Terminal Facilities, Terminal Division Facilities at the old Boston and Maine Railroad. And the bottom photograph shows you the Union Station at Sanford, North Carolina. This building and 4 others like it are all renovated and still standing in North Carolina, Georgia, and South Carolina. So there's still 5 of these on the southern system. So that represents my my biggest challenge to date. We should have that available early in 2021. And Jim, that pretty much takes me in the allotted time of 5 minutes, I believe. Okay. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, feel free to add something into the chat and I'll respond there. Thank you, Dylan.
Jack, thank you so much. Gentlemen, I don't know how many of you all have ever heard of Jack's company before, but Jack is the kind of modeler and the kind of manufacturer that are in our train shows. We don't have the large manufacturers. We don't have resellers. We have actual manufacturers. And that's the market that we're trying to put into the train shows, and the people that we want to hopefully introduce you to expand your knowledge of the manufacturing base that's out there that's providing great models for our hobby. So Jack, thank you so much again for being part of our show, and we hope that you'll continue in that regard.
Thank you, Jim.
Now, if you have not already done so, I'd like for you to consider going to our newtraxmodeling.com website, newtraxmodeling.com. If you'll register on that site, then you'll get all the notices of our future meetup shows like this one, as well as the various train shows that we host. And I hope that you'll do that because it'll save us from a lot of trouble trying to find you again. Our next new build, or my build section that Chris Coach runs for us, is December the 12th. We had so many people bring models last time that we ran out of time, and we had some people that we couldn't do this for. And I've had change one person from the upcoming show. So the show after this on the 21st is also going to be a My Build show. And we hope that you'll bring your models to that one. And we'll try our darndest to get you on. If we can't, we may just have to extend the show a little bit, Chris, to try to make sure we get everybody. But we were so pleased about the turnout that we had last time that it's obvious that that was well received, and we want to try to accommodate you. So It'll be the one that's coming up after this, and it'll be on the 21st of October.
And guys by the name of Paul get the first dibs, because those are the three guys that got cut out of the last one. I apologize again for that, but we'll put them on first, I promise.
Well, with that said, that's all of my announcements tonight. Our featured modeler tonight is somebody I think you're really going to enjoy. John Fereca is an MMR, a beautiful layout that he's going to talk us through and show us a little bit of. And I really do appreciate, John, you taking the time to be with us this evening. And I'll turn it over to you, sir, and look forward to seeing your model railroad.
Thank you, everyone. My name's John Fereca. My layout is an HO scale layout called the Stone Canyon Railroad. And what I'm going to do tonight is bounce between a couple of PowerPoint presentations, one going through a little history of the layout and some of the construction techniques. And then I'll go and do a tour of the layout, town to town. And any questions you guys want to ask, feel free to ask while I'm doing the presentation. We don't have to wait till the end. So I'm going to share my screen now. And let's see.
John, before you do that, I've got one thing. Let me mention this to you. We have, in addition to John tonight, we're really privileged to have a guy by the name of Bill Flint. And James Schultz brought him to my attention. And Bill started out as a line L modeler, went to 2-rail O scale, and now he uses the darndest materials I've heard of in his model railroading. And I think you're really going to enjoy hearing from him. He's going to be after John is finished, and we're not going to cut John short. So what I want to do is, when John is finished, we've had all the questions and answers done, then I'm going to sign off of this video portion of our show. And Dylan will stop it at that point. And about 30 seconds or so, Dylan will restart the video again. And I'll introduce James Schultz and Bill Flint. And then Bill will be able to talk as long as he needs for his presentation. And if you have to leave the show, I understand, because this one probably is going to be much longer than the normal show. But we're still going to video the whole thing and still post the 2 separate videos, one of our regular show with John doing what he's doing now, and then the second one with Bill Flint after that. John, I apologize. I forgot to say that on the front end.
No problem. Okay, can everyone see the first slide here?
No.
It just says you started screen sharing.
Okay. How about now?
No.
change.
I didn't miss much.
Okay, let's try this again. Yeah, I'm getting this message that says your screen sharing is paused.
That's new.
Which I'm not sure why.
That's a new problem. I haven't heard of that before.
Let me try this again. Yeah, I keep getting this message that says your screen sharing is paused. So you don't,
Message.
you're not seeing the introduction to the layout slide?
No, I'm not. I don't even know why it's coming up as paused. I didn't even know it could do that.
I got a message on my screen. It says John has started screen sharing.
Yeah, that's what I got.
It's thinking.
Not a bug, it's an undocumented feature.
There, something came up.
There we go. We're good. We can see it now.
Okay, so the first segment here, I'm going to just kind of go through the details of the layout and some of my beginning construction photos, and so we'll get started. Stone Canyon Railroad is a fully operational freelance single-deck layout based in the western U.S. The layout was built in various stages between 2004 and 2018 and is 100% finished. The time frame is 1950s steam diesel transition era. UP and ATSF are the predominant roads. Overall layout size is 28 feet by 39 feet, which includes hidden staging. The main line is 400-foot double track, east and westbound closed loop. There's 120 feet of hidden staging track. Total trackage is over 1,000 feet. Visible track is all code 83 and hidden staging is code 100. Scenery ranges from small towns to rugged mountains. There's also a 12-foot long city scene complete with full building and street lighting. Over 100 structures populate the layout, including plastic, wood, craftsman, plaster, scratch built, and kit bashed. Control is DCC using Digitrix Super Chief duplex radio. Operations include passenger, local freight, coal, and through freight. Switching opportunities include a coal mine, over 35 industries, a large freight yard, lumber branch line, and a full service steam diesel engine shop. The shops include a 130-foot turntable, 12-stall roundhouse, coal, water, sand, cinder pit, and diesel shop. The SCRR has hosted over 80 operating sessions since 2013 and has participated in every Island Ops weekend since its inception in 2014. This is the track plan. I drew this track plan in AutoCAD 2D. I'm a mechanical engineer by profession, so I have some pretty good CAD tools at my disposal. So going through this list here, HO scale, freelanced, walk-in style. The room size is 45 by 30. This is the basement of my home. Layout size is 39 by 28. The height of the layout varies from 42 to 51 inches. Bench work is all L girder construction. The road bed is cork on 3/4 inch plywood. I already mentioned the track, main line, 200 feet each, eastbound and westbound. Minimum radius, 30 inches on the main line. Minimum turnout, number 5. Maximum grade, 2%. Scenery is mainly plaster and sculptamold over a cardboard lattice. The backdrop is 1/8 masonite, which is all hand painted, and control is Digitrix. Designing with CAD. The original SCRR track plan was drawn 1:1 scale using AutoCAD 2D software. This software was used to design benchwork, sub-road bed, track plan, road structures, scenic boundaries, etc. All turnouts are drawn to scale based on microengineering, Walthers, and Pico templates. AutoCAD allows you to draw in different layers and colors. The image at left shows only the track, structures, backdrop, and benchwork outline layers. The right image shows only the benchwork, sub-road bed, backdrop, and benchwork outline layers. The numbers shown are the track elevation heights. The sub-road bed was printed full scale. We have a large plotter at where I work, so I was able to print very large full scale prints. And those prints were adhered to 3/4 inch plywood and cut out with a jigsaw. The sections were then assembled together and supported off the benchwork. This method assured that the finished track matched the drawing. Here is a view of the 5 or the 6, I should say, the 6 benches that I designed and built. These are all L-girder. This was done in 3D solid modeling, which is another tool I use in my profession. Benchwork design began in May of 2003. The benchwork is L-girder construction. I designed the 5 individual benches using 3D solid modeling software. This allowed me to create individual drawings for each piece of wood. The benchwork construction took about 2 weeks to complete, went very quickly. The L-girder benchwork allows for free-form design by varying the length of the joists. The joists are mounted every 16 inches. Most are not shown in this view. So those of you that are familiar with L-girder benchwork, it's very simple and lightweight. And the largest piece of wood you use is a 1x4. And so on top of the L-girders, you mount your joists, which you can design at different lengths to create free-flowing curves. It's I never liked the box look of conventional bench work, so that's why I chose to use L-girder. Here's some early construction photos. Construction began in December 2003. Prior to starting the benchwork, I installed fluorescent lighting based on the outline of the layout. The benchwork and backdrop installations were mostly complete in about 4 weeks. The benchwork is constructed pine boards, 1x2, 3, and 4 inch. I used 3/4 inch plywood for flat areas. For legs, I used 2x2 pine with screwed in leveling on all the feet, on all the legs, I should say. The backdrop is screwed to 1x3 boards that are glued to the walls with construction adhesive. And the backdrop is 1/8 masonite. Backdrop construction and painting. Installing the backdrop in the early stages of construction was a critical step. It would have been impossible to install after scenery was started. I used 1/8 masonite, smooth side out. Backdrop painting started with sealing and sanding all the seams and screw heads with joint compound. Next, I primed the hardboard surface with Kil's all-purpose interior-exterior primer. This assured a smooth, even surface to apply the finished paint. For the basic sky colors, I used white and blue flat interior house paint. Any brand will suffice as long as it's flat. I started by rolling on white to the bottom, 1/3 of the backdrop, followed immediately with blue to the top 2/3. The most critical step is blending the 2 colors while still wet. With a wide 4-inch clean, high-quality brush, I quickly blended the 2 colors with long, even strokes till the backdrop was deep blue to white top to bottom. This is basically what I do on all the backdrop for the layout. And you'll see in future frames where I've painted mountain scenes and other types of backdrop scenery. Backdrop painting. In some places, my backdrop is only 4 inches from the fascia, so the painted image had to be convincing, even though the backdrop should not be the focal point of your layout. Painting terrain and trees was especially challenging for me. Although I consider myself an artist, landscape painting is not my specialty. I turned to Bob Ross for inspiration and watched many of his videos on YouTube. His simple techniques were the key to creating a visually convincing scene. I used a variety of artist acrylic paints and good quality brushes. I used at least 3 shades of green for the conifer trees and a variety of yellow and orange for the aspen trees. Since I model fall, I painted the grass and underbrush in fall colors. When I was satisfied with the overall effect, I airbrushed a very dilute mix of white acrylic from the tree line up to the mountains to create atmospheric haze. roadbed and track. So here are some, again, some very early photos of the roadbed and cork and track being laid. So track laying began in early 2004. In flat areas such as the freight and staging yards, I used 3/4 inch plywood screwed directly to the joists. Large sheets of cork were glued down in these areas beneath the track. For track that winds through mountainous terrain, the sub-road bed is 3/4 inch plywood screwed to risers mounted off the joists. I use cork roadbed from Midwest Products glued down to the sub-road bed. All track is flex track and is held down with Atlas track nails. Track sections are soldered together with feeders about every 6 feet. Electrical DCC. This is a schematic I drew up, pretty much showing all the components used on the DCC system. And so I'll just read through what I wrote here. Layout is DCC controlled. I use Digitrix Super Chief Radio Duplex 8 amp system. The layout is divided into 4 power districts with a Digitrix PM42 power manager. Some of my staging tracks are wired through a Digitrix BDL 168 occupancy detector, but detection is not currently in use. I use JMRI software interface to the layout with a railroad RR Circuits loco buffer USB device. JMRI is used to program decoders, monitor the layout during op sessions, as well as using Wii Throttle for smartphones. UT4D throttles are also available for operators. Fascia light, valance, and skirting. So as with the backdrop, I use 1/8 masonite for the light valance. The light valance basically follows the contours of the layout, and what it does is it's gloss white on the inside, so it really helps reflect the light evenly down onto the layout, and it also keeps the light out of your eyes in most areas. And then for the fascia, same thing. Use 1/8 masonite, all painted. I find that the black fascia and valance kind of draws your eye to the center and keeps you kind of focused on the layout. I also had skirting made up of 8-foot long cotton broadcloth panels that I had a local tailor basically hem up on 4 sides, and then I used small Velcro patches to attach it to the layout. Here are some of my scratch-built structures that went towards my AP certificate. Most of my scratch-built structures I did not build from existing plans. I designed my own plans. So all of my structures have AutoCAD drawings that show the overall dimensions and some other details. This building down here, I scratch built. It's all board-on-board construction. All of the clapboards are single individual boards. It's not sheet. These structures up here, they're all also basswood, all wood construction. These here I did use basswood clapboard and board and batten siding. And this lumber shed here is made up of well over 300 individual parts. It's highly detailed on the inside with all of the timber framing. And again, I did board-on-board siding for the sides and the rear of the building.
John, let me ask you a question.
Sure.
What tips do you have for people that want to try board-on-board?
Well, to get the the weathered look I wanted, I pre-painted and pre-weathered every board before I glued it on. I found that would give you a real good individual looking board. It was very time consuming. I didn't build all my structures that way, but I definitely wanted to try it on one. So that's one tip I would offer. You know, you can certainly paint it and weather it after it, but I think it looks more realistic if you do each board individually.
What was the hardest part of the board by board for you?
I just the quantity of the boards that you have to, you know, cut, paint, weather, and then glue on. Obviously, if it was a very large structure, it would be, you know, quite monotonous, but it wasn't too bad on this one. It's not that big of a structure, so it went relatively quickly.
Thank you.
I'm going to skip through a few of these. This is the engine service facility. Roundhouse and 130-foot turntable are all Walthers modern roundhouse series. I have a diesel car house here and all of the other structures, coal, water, cinder, sand. At this point, I'm going to switch over to my other PowerPoint where we're going to actually take a tour through the layout. Let's see. Oh, wrong one, sorry.
How big was that roundhouse of yours?
In size, it's from the center of the turntable to the end, it's probably about 2 feet. It's 12 stalls, so it's pretty big.
It's an impressive structure. Very nice.
Just trying to find the right PowerPoint, sorry. All right, just give me a moment. Okay, let's see if I can get this up now. Okay, can you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to go.
Looks good, yep.
I'm going to go to full screen. I'm going to toggle through some of these because some of these are duplicates. All right, so a few overall shots of the layout. This peninsula here is about a 12-foot long by 6-foot wide peninsula. I added this in 2014 to add more operations to the layout. So there's a few towns in here. Back here is the engine facility. Up here is the highest point of the layout where I have a coal mine. And I'll toggle through that. This is the town here called Red River. This is a shot looking from the engine service facility up towards the town of Red River. Back here along the back wall, I have a lumber branch line. This is the freight yard, main freight yard. This is a shot looking down the freight yard area and the coal mine. Okay, so what I'm going to do is take a tour through the layout, starting from staging, And what I have up in this upper hand corner on every slide is a screenshot of the track plan with the red dot showing where the train is. So our tour begins with a PFE eastbound train, TF20, headed up by Big Boy number 4020. And here the train is leaving the hidden staging yard. Big Boy is from Broadway Limited. TF20 leaving staging on the eastbound lead track. The staging yard has 11 tracks and can accommodate up to 200 freight cars. Here, TF20 is entering the eastbound main line track heading into the town of Flat Rock. This is behind the engine service facility here. TF20 passing through Flat Rock. The siding on the left supports 3 industries. So these 3 industries are all wood kits. The center one is one of my scratch-built structures as well. And these 3 industries are switched by eastbound freight trains. Stone City Light and Power receives coal and supplies. This is a Walthers Kit. Some of you may know it's fairly popular kit. Flat Rock Millworks receives lumber and ships millwork products. This is one of my scratch-built structures. So this structure, I designed loosely on a structure that one of my fellow modelers in my operations group has. I really liked it, and I just kind of designed it based on what that structure looked like. This is using milled clapboard siding, not board on board. The loading dock, however, is all board on board. I scratch built the stairs and the railing here. The shingles are, I forget who I got them from, but they're individual strips that you apply. They're laser cut paper. And then I added a bunch of details, roof vents and other things. This is a craftsman kit from JL Innovations, Super Sweet Feeds. Also another industry on that same siding. Engel Paper. Engel Paper receives pulpwood and chemical tanker cars. Fereca Fuel in the foreground switches fuel, oil tankers, and coal hoppers. So this is a fairly large Walthers structure here, and this receives pulpwood from the lumber mill, which is all the way in the back here. So I try to have structures that serve a purpose on the layout where I can, ship from one industry to another. It just makes it a little bit more interesting. Little Fork Transload. This is a structure that, a business that moves goods throughout the layout to and from various industries. This also has an LCL less than carload track on this side of the building. Dwyer Manufacturing, located in Little Fork. This ships manufactured metal goods and scrap metals to industries throughout the layout. Again, another Walthers kit. Little Fork Freight receives LCL cars. Both the freight house and water tank are craftsman kits from Laser Art. Very nice kits. Fairly challenging to put together the water tank, but definitely nice kits to build. On the same side as the freight house is Jacklich Meat and Stockyard. The stockyard receives cattle and feed. So again, I deliver cattle to the layout. Now, the deliveries of cattle come from staging because I don't have any other types of industries that would ship in cattle. So we just have these cars identified from other areas of the country. And, they come from staging. This is Jack Litch Meat and Packaging, which processes the cattle that are delivered, and we ship meat products to other industries on the layout. And again, another Walthers Kit. Here's an overall view of the Flat Rock Little Fork Peninsula that was completed in 2014. And this area has 13 industries. And here's a same view of that peninsula from 2014 when I was first building it. Being that this is a flat area, no mountains, no track elevation changes, it went together pretty quickly. I built this in about 6 months. Again, I did the track plan in AutoCAD and planned out all of the locations of the turnouts and the buildings, and so it went together fairly quickly. Here I use cork sheet for parking lots and the base for roads. Overall photo of Stone City Engine Service Facility, a very busy area during op sessions. Stone City Heights can be seen in the background. This is the city scene I built. The Stone City Shops is a busy area during op sessions. I have a full-time engine motive power hostler that works this area, taking motive power in and out during the session, and he also switches cars in and out at various industries in this area. And here's an early construction photo of that same area. Here's a close-up photo of Stone City Heights. This scene is about 10 feet long by 1 foot deep, and also has building and street lighting. So if I go back, this city scene was not in the original plan. When I started building this area, I really was kind of wondering, what am I going to put back here? It's a very large sweeping curve, and so I decided to put a city scene in, and so I basically had to halt construction of this whole area, because to get to that back area after this was all built would have been impossible. So I spent about a year building this rear city scene, and I actually have a whole clinic on how I built that.
John, excuse me a sec. Dylan, can you just stop everybody from being heard?
I'm trying to figure out whose dog is barking, to be honest with you.
That's
Why don't
my
we block? Let's just block everybody until John can get through this, then we can ask questions again, because the dog is killing me.
Well, the dog is in my house, so
Okay.
You're going to keep hearing.
Well, then we still got the dog, Dylan. Don't worry about it.
Alrighty.
Here's another shot looking down the main drag of Stone City Heights. These structures here in the foreground are downtown deco plaster kits. I don't know if any of you guys have built these, but they're spectacular kits. Super detailed, pretty easy to build, and they just finish really, really nice. TF20 on the Stone City Yard lead. So now we're entering the yard with Stone City Heights in the background. TF20 on one of 2 arrival departure tracks. The yard also has 3 classification tracks. The yard has a 45 car capacity. And these foreground buildings here are in a little area I call Dwyerville. These 3 industries we also switch, and these are, I believe, Bar Mills kits, if I'm not mistaken. We also have a series of background buildings that we also switch cars out of, and these are mostly, I believe, Walthers kits. Some of them are kit bashed. This is Stone City Station, another Walthers kit. This station services both the eastbound and westbound main line. which straddles it on both sides. TF20 passing East Tower, exiting Stone City Yard. Tower is also a Walthers Kit. And here we are rounding the curve out of the yard and heading into a small town called Ryan's Corner. All the rock strata here you see I hand carved from plaster. And the conifer trees are a mix of scratch-built and commercial trees. This is the town of Ryan's Corner, a small little town. This is where 4 of my scratch-built structures reside. And we switch this area. These 3 foreground buildings are switched by eastbound trains, and the 2 rear buildings are switched by westbound trains. So this can be a kind of busy area if we have 2 trains switching cars at the same time. Here's a few of the scratch-built structures that I went over before. Also, in this scene, I always wanted to model an abandoned track. And so what I did here is I hand-laid individual ties that I cut from basswood, and then used Code 70 rail that I spiked down and then basically buried in ballast and dirt and weeds and some static grass. Here is what I call the signature scene on my layout, Stone Canyon. It's a fairly complex area, and in the next slide I'll show you the various construction photos. So here's an early shot of the scenery going in, track work. My techniques for doing mountains and hills are cardboard lattice that I hot glue together. And over that, I generally hot glue some craft paper. I found that if you lay your either plaster gauze or hand dipped towels directly over that grid, you'll see the grid. It'll kind of mimic it. And so what I do is I lay down a brown craft paper over this lattice. I just hot glue it right to it. Then over that, I put down the plaster gauze and Sculptamold and plaster rocks and whatnot. And that hides that grid and gives it a nice smooth finish. Here you can see this is all Sculptamold. I love using Sculptamold. It's a very versatile product. It takes a long time to dry, so you have a lot of working time with it. And it dries to a very hard finish, very durable. Over that, I have, these are basically Woodland Scenics rock molds that I use just basically casting plaster. I don't use hydrocal. I use just regular plaster of Paris. And then these are adhered to the Sculptamold before everything's painted. And I use a layer of Sculptamold to adhere them. And then I fill in all the cracks and crevices with another thin layer of Sculptamold. And then I use, mainly use acrylic washes. I use artist tube acrylics. And I basically, first thing I do is I wet the rocks because plaster is like a sponge. So I spray on, I spray the plaster rocks until they're soaked. And then I start brushing on layers of diluted acrylic artist paints and just work my way until I'm happy with it. And then I finish the rest of the scene with the same color. So what I tried to do on this layout is use one color that ties in the entire layout. And for me, the color I used was raw sienna. And that's a tip I would give to modelers, to stick with one color for your scenery as a base color, and it really will tie the whole layout together. So this area, again, was a very complex area. It took me several months to get it together and finally finish it. So now we're entering the town of Red River. This is the river here. So this river here is, and for all my water scenes, again, I use a layer of Sculptamold on the bottom. If anyone's ever used Envirotex Light, you know that it will find the tiniest little pinhole and leak out. So the river bottom was completely sealed with Sculptamold, then painted, then I used small river rocks adhered down and little chips of plaster to represent these boulders, all glued down before the first layer was poured. I also tint the Envirotex with a little amber tint. Just gives it a little bit of color. Some people think that a blue color would be correct for a river or a stream, and it's just not realistic. Most rivers and streams are kind of brownish color. So to get the effect of moving water, as some of you might know, Envirotex Light hardens to a perfectly flat surface. So if you're modeling a perfectly flat water scene, that's fine. But for a river scene, what I did is I applied a layer of gloss medium over the Envirotex and just kind of stipple it on. And it's a very thick product and it will kind of stay where you put it. And when it dries clear. And then the finishing touches to represent foaming water around the rocks, I just stippled on a little white acrylic paint, and that creates that foaming water effect. And this is the town of Red River. This town has 3 industries that handle freight. And it also has a downtown district. Some of these city blocks here actually pop out. It's a deep scene, so I had to create a pop out here in order to get back into these areas to work. Here's another shot of TF20. So for roads, originally I started using Woodland Scenics Smooth It, which is basically like a plaster, but it's messy. You have to put on several layers. So I decided to try styrene sheet. So this is basically styrene sheet 040 thick. I scribe in expansion joints and cracks with a dental tool, and then painted a concrete color and weather it with pastels, and much quicker and easier to make than plaster. And for me, it's just as convincing. And here's a shot looking down the Red River Peninsula. This scene is about good 10 foot deep. And so this side of the road here, this is all using the Woodland Scenic Smooth It. And then once I finished that, I changed over to styrene for modeling streets. Here's a progression of shots of the Red River area. This first shot here is 2004, where you can see I have the backdrop installed and the bench work has gone in. And prior to doing any work in here, I hand painted in these mountain areas and foreground mountains. And you can see here, this is the beginning of the river that I built. I used basic window screen to form the embankments. And the bottom of the river starts out with just a piece of masonite and then just gets built up with layers of Sculptamold. And then here is the finished scene on the right. The most recent addition to the Stone Canyon Railroad is the Beaver Creek lumber branch line. This was added in 2018. the mill here supplies lumber, pulpwood, and railroad ties to various industries on the layout. I scratch built this mill back here because I couldn't find anything that would fit in the scene, nothing available commercially. This was a real nice project to work on, and I have a full clinic on how I built this entire scene here. So TF20 is now heading back up the 2% grade toward Rockwell Mine. So from Red River, the track climbs a 2% grade until it gets to the mine scene, which is the highest point on the layout. Here it is exiting Tunnel 3 near Rockwell Mine. Some of these trees in the foreground are some of my scratch-built conifer trees. And this is the coal mine. Mine supplies coal to various industries across the layout. The mine has 3 tipple tracks and 1 holding track. The mine train that runs during operation swaps 16 empties for 16 loads. Another Walthers Kit, very common kit. A lot of kit bashing is done with these, although I built this per the original design. TF20 exiting Tunnel 2 just east of the Rockwell Mine. From here, the train will re-enter staging, and that concludes the tour. I'll talk a little bit about operations. The Stone Canyon Railroad began monthly operations in 2013. We've hosted over 80 sessions, including all of the yearly Island Op sessions beginning in 2014. I belong to an operations group, Central Suffolk Operations Group, that meets weekly and operates across 6 layouts in Suffolk County, New York. We use the car card and waybill system for freight forwarding. The layout can operate with between 5 and 10 people. Positions include dispatcher, yardmaster, motive power hostler, local and through freight crews, and passenger operation. We run anywhere between 12 and 16 trains in a 3-hour session. Most trains begin and end their run from staging. Several trains are made up in the Stone City Freight Yard. At any given time, there can be up to 3 local freights running, along with passenger trains. Operations added the finishing touch to my layout. And that concludes the layout tour. So I welcome any questions on anything you saw, or how did you do this? How did you do that?
Well, I'm going to steal Jim's trademark question here for a second. So let's say you're building something, John.
Mm-hmm.
How do you know when it's finished?
That's a good question. I don't know. I guess for me, I don't want to dwell too long on a model. I mean, obviously, you can take a model and detail it to death. But you know, on a layout of this size, I have a finite amount of time. I have a lot of structures. All my structures are weathered. Most of my rolling stock and diesel and steam roster are weathered. So it takes up a lot of time to do all that. And so for me, I take it to a point where I feel it's done. The scratch built structures, obviously I had to get them judged for merit. So I had to stop at a point where I felt that they would score over 87.5 points. That being said, I like to detail my structures. I don't go crazy with it, but it's really just a kind of a personal choice how far you want to take it.
John, I've got a question on your JMRI
Okay.
with your Digitrix. How difficult is JMRI to use? I mean, you have to be a programmer to use it.
No.
What did you find?
No, a lot of misconceptions. Now, it depends on how far you want to take it. For me, I find it's far, far easier to program a decoder using JMRI than using a hand throttle. All you really need is an interface between your DCC system and your laptop or your desktop. You download the software, it's free, and you get an interface device. You can get them from various places and various models. They're less than $50. And you basically start by putting an engine on the programming track, and you say, read from decoder. And JMRI will read the decoder and it will import all the information from the decoder. And then you build your roster from there. That's the simple part. Now, once you have your roster set up, you can click on an engine on the main line or on the programming track, and then go to the programming section, and it will come up with all these different screens where you can program sound. So, for instance, you'll get a screen that'll have all the different sound settings for depending on the decoder. You can program every one of those features at once and say write to decoder, and it'll send all that into the decoder and it'll write it all instantly. That's my limit of how I use it. I also use it to monitor the layout. It will tell me if I have a short. It will tell me which power district I have a short in. It won't tell me where the short is. It'll just tell me that I have a short somewhere in the power district. I can program stationary decoders with it. I can program my Digitrix booster with it. Now, you can also go much, much further with it. One of the guys in my operations group, he has a layout that's fully signaled. And he's a signals engineer by trade, so he understands how signaling systems work. JMRI has a feature that you can build a full screen of a yard, for instance, with all the signals tied in. Way over my head, but you can take it very, very far and very deep into signaling. But if you just want to get into it just for programming decoders, very easy.
Okay, thank you.
John?
Yes.
Greg Cassidy here. I have a comment. It's beautiful layout and wonderful structure modeling. One of the things I was most impressed with, the Little Fork Transfer Load House. I know we all like to put a little bit of debris around some of our structures. That had a lot of lumber around it, and it just really looked right.
Yeah, I try to create scenes within the scene. And that's one of the things that I'm going to take to the next level. Obviously, the layout is complete. It's operational. All the structures are there. But I could probably spend the next couple of years super detailing all these little scenes. And that's what really brings the layout to life.
Yes, and you have a good eye for that. I'd love to see it in another 2 years.
Thank you.
Anybody else have questions for John?
Now, John, you mentioned part of your layout, the city scene is all lit.
Mm-hmm.
How did you wire that? Did you just use terminal strips? How did you hook that all up?
Well,
I'm just, from a guy who's wired a friend's layout's lighting, I'm curious what other people have done.
Well, what I did, and again, I have a whole another clinic on how I built that whole scene. So since there's so many structures, and when I did the buildings, I didn't want to just stick a light in the building. So I built little compartments within each building, and I only lit up certain parts of the building to make it realistic. So each building may have 5 or 6 or 10 lights in it. And yeah, you're right, the wiring could be a nightmare. So what I did is I bought really thin copper strips, 5/1000 of an inch thick by 1/4 inch wide, with a self-adhesive backing. It comes in a roll. And I laid down 2 strips of that along the entire seam in the back of the buildings. And each building, all the wiring would come together in 2 feeders, and those feeders would get soldered directly to the copper bus. And so I have I have feeders to this bus all along, and then I have one main power coming in to feed the bus. So it made it a lot easier to wire, and each building is connected via a wire nut. So if I ever have to move the building off, I can just undo the wire nuts and the whole building will come off with all of the internal wiring intact.
John, where do you buy that?
The copper strip I bought from McMaster Car. It's an industrial company that sells just about anything you can think of.
McMaster what?
McMaster Car.
CARR?
Yes.
Yeah, like in my CAD program, Jim, they're listed as the main supplier for all the the nuts and bolts and screws and threaded rod. And
just about anything you can think of, this company has. It's amazing.
their whole catalog, you could design anything to take one of their parts, whether it be a gear, whether it be a screw. You could just import whatever they have in their catalog right into my.
Yes.
I could do that right into my CAD program. It's awesome.
Yeah. So for my profession, my company, we build kind of high-end equipment, coating equipment for aerospace and semiconductor. And as an engineer, when we're designing these systems, we're constantly downloading parts from McMaster Car because they're already 3D modeled, and we can just import them right into our program and use them. So anyway, that's where I bought that copper strip from.
What other neat things like that do you buy from for your modeling? I'd never heard of that kind of copper strip. That's great.
I don't buy too much. Most of my stuff I buy from like Micromark. They're great for all kinds of tools and gadgets and things like that. But that was probably one of the few things I did buy from McMaster, other than like the leveling feet for all the bench work. I bought that from McMaster, as well as the threaded portion that you drill a hole in the end of the bench leg, and you tap in a little metal threaded piece that the leveling foot screws into. So hardware and stuff like that is where I bought stuff from McMaster from.
Gotcha.
McMaster's a great source for small drills and brass, tubing, shapes, plate, everything you can think of that you could use in model railroad.
Exactly.
I've never even heard of them before.
Jim, that's because you scratch build everything you make.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I buy brass, I buy all this stuff. I mean, I've never gone to this. I've never heard of this company. Jeez.
Micromark sells a lot of that stuff too. They're probably a little bit pricier though.
Yeah.
Yeah, about double.
Yeah.
Yeah, McMaster Car, I want to say, is about what the industrial version of Micromark.
Yeah, or the industrial version of Amazon.
I can order something from McMaster and I'll have it on the third day.
They have minimum purchases or anything like that?
I don't know. I haven't I've had an account with them for 10 years or more.
You can order any quantity you want.
Oh, okay. That's great. Fantastic. I learned something tonight. I've never heard of them before.
if you order a small quantity, the freight will eat you alive.
Yeah,
Because I'll get a 72 drill or something like that, and get a half a dozen of them, and the freight's $10.
Yeah.
And they ship it in a box about 8 by 8 by 6. Now, around the world they put it in that, but that's the way they do.
I think,
It's
I
probably
think,
the only box size they have.
It's probably right.
yeah, Jim, I think their competitor is Granger.
Yeah,
So
this is about
Granger is
right.
another industrial supply, Grainger.
Yeah.
They both sell like huge catalogs of industrial parts.
Yep. Yes, my company buys from them too, but I think McMaster probably has them beat in variety of parts.
For model railroad, definitely they have them beat.
okay. Well, I appreciate it. I've never heard of this company. Of course, I get stuck. I've been buying from the same companies for years and years, so I don't even look for companies anymore. If I need brass, I buy it here. If I need this, I buy it there. I've just never looked for other companies or really had people talk to me about other companies. So I guess I'm stuck in the mud.
I buy all my drills and all my small screws from 0090 up to 256 and 440. I'm an O scale, but I get it all from them. And where you pay $6 for half a dozen of them at the hobby shop, you get 100 of them for $7 there.
Yeah.
Well, Jim, that's why you put on these shows, so we all learn from each other.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I need all the help I can get.
Hey, Jim, this is Neil in Hawaii. I'm curious where you buy your brass.
K&S,
Of course.
but I have to buy $100 minimum every time I call them up. So for me, that's not a problem because brass is what I love to build it.
McMaster Car sells K&S brass.
Yeah. Do they really?
Yes, sir.
Well, that solves my problem. I have to worry about getting my minimum anymore. That's why I ask about the minimum. Every time I call K&S, every time I call them, I know I'm looking at $150.
And they have McMaster has an excellent website.
Hey,
I'll
John.
be there in the morning.
John, you mentioned you like to build those the deco plaster buildings, and I'm curious what you use. Do you use epoxy to glue those together?
White glue.
Just white glue.
Yep. Yeah.
And then, so do you finish it before you glue them together so you don't get a staining?
Well, so there's some sanding involved because the castings aren't perfect. So, the first thing you want to do is square everything up, make sure all the seams are nice and straight without gaps, glue it together with white glue, and then the entire thing gets a coat of white rattle can spray, flat spray paint. And then from there, I use acrylics, washes. There was some techniques I saw on, I believe on his website. Downtown Deco is one guy, works out of his house. He hand carves all of the parts of the building, and then he molds them. And I believe this technique I got from him where after you paint the buildings, you rub them down with really, really fine steel wool. And it gives like a nice, kind of weathered look. So I use those techniques, and then all my other techniques like powdered pastels and India ink wash, to get the final look you want. But the detail in the kits are just unsurpassed, from a plastic kit, as far as what I've seen for brick and mortar structures.
Yeah, I like them a lot. Tom York years ago, I believe it was him who posted how to carve and then make castings of your own. In O scale, I think that's the way I kind of have to go.
Yep.
So Neil, you said you're in Hawaii?
Yeah, I'm on the Big Island. Yeah.
What scale you model?
1/4 inch narrow gauge, 0-30.
I think I know who you are somehow.
Well, if you watched any of the NMRA X, you've probably seen me introducing and interviewing a lot of the presenters. Yeah. So good fun. And then plus I like to model the Oahu Railway. But I did want to go back to the presenters' design methods, and you very much an engineering style, you know, the way you've done it from beginning to end, pre-thinking everything. And did you ever have to find yourself moving joists or risers to make sure they weren't under turnouts and switch areas? And what about signaling? Did you think that far ahead?
Yeah, I mean, I did, because I obviously I designed the whole layout in 2D, and if you noticed when I spoke about different layers that you can use in CAD, so a layer is a line that you can turn on and off, and you can name it. So I had like a layer was called roadbed, a layer was called joist, a layer was called girder. So using also the turnout templates that I drew up in CAD from, you know, the actual turnouts. So I can place a turnout and I can see exactly where it fell in relation to a joist underneath. So I could move the joists around in the design before I actually built it. So to answer the question, I think I had one instance where I had an issue where I had to cut out a joist, you know, after everything was already in place. But for the most part, because I designed it ahead of time and I used the CAD program, I was able to see where everything was going to be, and it was built, you know, pretty much pretty accurately to the design. One of the biggest benefits I found was the roadbed. Getting all the sweeping curves and the S curves that went up grades and around in the mountainous areas, that was all printed directly from the CAD program, full scale, onto a big sheet of paper. And then I arranged all those pieces so that they would be efficiently laid out on a piece of plywood, cut them all out, and everyone had a number at the end of the, so I knew where they connected. And that just literally worked out perfectly. I mean, it just fit exactly where it should be. And
you mean like registration points on the 24 by 36 sheets or whatever?
Well, no, each piece that I cut, each sweeping curve, I had a number at the end of each one, and that would correspond to the next part. So I knew which part went next. It was kind of like a puzzle, just joining all these roadbed pieces up as I built it along on the benchwork. So,
do you mind me asking what kind of engineering you do for a daytime job?
So mechanical engineering, I'm a manager. I manage a group of engineers. My company builds high-tech coating equipment for aerospace, for semiconductor, and medical. So I've been with this company over 30 years, and obviously I have the ability to, you know, utilize a big roll plotter. You know, this is what I do for a living, so it kind of falls into the hobby. I like to plan things out. It's just kind of my nature. I do it every day. I know some people just, when they build a layout, they'll kind of just wing it, or you know, work with graph paper, and that's fine. You know, whatever works for you. But for me, the bench work for this layout literally was finished in 4 weeks. You know, because I planned it all out. I made drawings of all the L girders, and I just cut all the wood, you know, and built it to the drawings. And, you know, then it took another 15 years to finish the layout. Scenery.
The devil's in the details. Yeah.
Scenery and structures are just the longest, you know, the most amount of time, because there's so much detail you have to do.
Well, the reason I ask is I often wonder about the question of the chicken and the egg, you know, to become model railroaders because of our interest in engineering or architecture in my case, or the other way around. So I think they augment each other very well. Well, I am more toward the artistic bent, and I can see where you come from.
That being said, I built the layout to satisfy my artistic side, which includes, you know, building, working with lumber. But I've always been artistic ever since I can remember. I was always drawing and painting and building models. You know, I grew up in the 60s and 70s. I didn't get into trains until way after the Lionel era. You know, I was building models from the space race, Apollo rockets, and all that kind of stuff. And I was in the hobby shop one day when I was around 10, and I picked up an issue of Model Railroader and started looking through it and was like, wow, this is cool. So I see this hobby as an art form. You know, a lot of people do it to operate. I didn't get into operations until the layout was well on its way. I didn't even know what operations was until I walked into a guy's layout and he gave me a throttle and said, "We're down a guy, you're in." And, you know, it kind of took off from there. But operations gave the layout a purpose, and it also gave me the impetus to finish it. Because around 2012, I was kind of getting a little jaded and a little bored. And, you know, then I met this group of guys and they came down and they said, "Hey, you know, all you have to do is make a few changes and, you know, we can have an op session." And that was the moment that pushed me to finish the layout. So there's two sides of the story here. You know, there's the building it as an art form and then finishing it as an operating layout. So that's kind of my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Thank you. Appreciate being able to participate. This time of day works really well for me. You'll probably get a call from Dazzy J there. He's a podcaster and he's been listening in.
I did an interview with Dazzy about 2 weeks ago.
Oh, okay. We'll see it coming then soon.
Yeah, it's already up on YouTube.
Neil, I'd like to talk to you off of after this is over. Dylan, can you send Neil my email address?
Sure thing. I'll send it to him in the chat.
Yeah, thank you, Jim and Dylan. I think Dazzy got me on a broadcast talking about dead rail, so I think it's still up there on YouTube.
Yeah. Do you use dead rail, Neil?
I have a lot of engines that are dead rail. Yeah, I've been playing with it a long time. There, I've got it. Thank you. And Jim, you've actually invited me to this, so I saw you on Facebook. So thank you.
Yeah. I'm glad you came. Thank you.
Well, y'all got to come out to Hawaii. I got a little hotel you can stay in.
You paying for the plane trip?
If you come right now, it's probably only a couple $100 from the East Coast.
Yeah, but it's $500 to get the test, so you don't have to spend 2 weeks in quarantine.
Well, once you land here, that test is free, but the one that you got to do on your own, that's up to you. Of course, Kaiser might do it for free.
Only been to Hawaii one time. It was about 25, 28, 30 years ago, something like that. We picked, my wife and I went over to a convention, and we picked the time that the garbage people were on strike. And there was garbage. You walked out of the airplane and you walked through garbage the rest of the time. It was the worst place I've ever seen.
Oh my God.
Well, if there's no other questions, I have a dinner reservation I have to make. So if anyone has any other questions, please ask. If not, I'm going to be exiting the meeting.
It's a wonderful looking layout, John. Thank you so much for showing it.
Thank you for having me.
John,
thanks, John.
Thanks so much for coming, John. I really do appreciate it. Thank you. Have a nice dinner.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Take care.
Jim, I'll shoot you a note, Jim.
Yeah. Next week or Wednesday, we're going to have another My Bill section, as I said. And I hope you'll return for that. And I hope you'll come back and show us your models. Now, I want to try to end this and then give Bill a chance to talk to us about what his modeling is all about. I hope you can stay for it. If you can, I understand. But if you can't, then you can always watch it on video that Bill will post later. So thank you so much for coming. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something that'll help you in your modeling. I know